TCS and Infosys pioneered the concept of IT. TCS and Infosys pioneered the concept of IT outsourcing. And today they do everything around IT and digital services for the world's biggest companies. A similar concept is now emerging in manufacturing, with Arvind Meligeri's Karnataka-based Aequs among the pioneers of this concept. The idea is to provide everything from design and technology services to actual manufacturing services for global companies. Multiple such clusters are emerging for aerospace, toys, consumer electronics, FMCG. Today, we are going to discuss this model and whether it could transform the manufacturing ecosystem in India. So welcome to this Times Techies webinar. I'm Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Phadnis. The two of us will moderate the discussion, which we're having in association with Aequs. We have 5 seasoned professionals on the panel. We have with us Gunjan Krishna. Gunjan is Commissioner in the Karnataka Government's Department of Industries and Commerce. Gunjan did economics in Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi, followed that up with a law degree from Campus Law Center in Delhi University, and joined the IAS in 2004. She has been active in the development of the semiconductor ecosystem in Karnataka and the development of other industrial clusters in the state. Welcome, Gunjan. We have Kishore Rao. Kishore is CEO of Aequs Infra and is a director on the board of Quest Global Engineering. Kishore took on this role in April last year, prior to which for 9 years he was with sister company Quest Global Engineering in different roles. Before Quest, Kishore was with 3M for 24 years in various capacities, ranging from business development to operations, as well as country head responsibilities. Welcome, Kishore.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjiv.
We have Sanjiv Khullar. Sanjiv is Managing Director of Regional Sourcing for India and Southeast Asia for Hasbro. If you have a child, Hasbro would be a familiar name. They are one of the biggest toy makers globally, toys like Monopoly, Disney Princess, Marvel Toys, Play-Doh. Sanjiv has been with Hasbro for over 5 years now. Prior to that, he was Senior VP of Global Operations at Bureau Veritas Consumer Product Services Business. Bureau Veritas is one of the world's leading quality assurance and compliance service providers. Welcome, Sanjiv.
Thank you, Shilpa.
We have Ullas Kamath. Ullas was with Jyothi Labs for 31 years and was most recently its joint managing director. Jyothi Labs is the maker of brands like Ujala, Henko, Prill, Exo, Marco, and Inactive. He played a key role in establishing large manufacturing facilities for Jyothi Labs. He remains an advisor on the company. He's also the chairman of the Karnataka State Council for FICCI. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And we have with us Dr. Guttal Ravi. Ravi is the CTO and SVP at Aequs Private Limited. He has an amazing academic record. He did his BE from NIT Karnataka, ME from Structural Mechanics from ISE Bangalore, MS in Robotics from Carnegie Mellon University, and did PhD in Computational Mechanics from New York's renowned Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, a postgraduate diploma in management from the same institute. He has worked with John Deere and was the director of the Center for Innovation and Product Development at KLE Technological University in Hubli before joining Aequs. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Those of you who in this can send in questions to the Facebook comment box. Sujit and I will put them to Gunjan, Kishore, Sanjiv, Ullas, and Ravi. Let me start with you, Kishore. The concept of industrial clusters has been around for some time now. But now we are talking about a different concept of clusters where you're managing the entire ecosystem from design, technology, and how it's going to play a key role in the ecosystem. Can you help us understand this concept better and how the ecosystem of efficiencies that are at play here?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I would first like to also thank all the other co-panelists, and it's an honor to be with all of you. Your sterling records and past record achievements, so pleasure to be here. Especially Ms. Gunjan Krishna, who's been tremendous help for us in Karnataka in every which way. So thank you for being here, ma'am. Very, very appreciative of that. So before I get into your questions specifically, I would like to just go back a little bit in time. Small story. 25 years ago, I traveled to Thailand. Okay. At that time, the Thai baht, which is the currency in Thailand, was 25 rupees to a dollar. The Indian rupee was 25 rupees to a dollar. Okay. Today, the Thai baht, the Indian rupee is 75 rupees to a dollar, thereabouts. And the Thai baht is at a very respectable $33 baht to a dollar. So currency being one of the best bargaining chips in international trade, I would think, I'm a little surprised to know our exports is $400 billion annually, which is about 18% of our GDP, whereas Thailand exports $250 billion, 64% of their GDP. Now just look at the stark difference. It's amazing a country as small as Thailand with the relatively less resources that we have in terms of technology, technical manpower, mineral resources, demand, etc., has been able to do this. So for me, exports is a very, very important part of any country's development to be a real staying power in the world stage, right? Because when you do exports, you also make yourself globally competitive. You don't need to depend on government for subsidies and support and all that stuff, right? So that is one stark thing for me. It's a conundrum, actually. Why is India struggling to be a global manufacturing powerhouse? Our brothers and sisters in IT services have shown us the way, right? They were given the opportunity and they've become world-class. Why is that? Because they've achieved scale. I'm not saying India does not have that excellence in manufacturing. We have the organized sector, which is doing extremely, extremely well. So automotive, specialty chemicals, steel, so many sectors, textiles, mobile telephony, and so on. But where the next struggle comes is actually in the MSME segment. When you get down to the MSME segment, it's pretty disorganized. And if you could take the example of China's success, now they became members of the WTO in just 2001, where they've come as a global manufacturing source. We are struggling. Even in the SEZ model, we have struggled, okay? So that's why this cluster concept. It's a very small, I would say, a microcosm of what China does. Their SEZs are like almost townships, maybe the size of a district. But what we are trying to do in a cluster is to build manufacturing centers of excellence where we can have a supply chain ecosystem, where we can put in a competitive manufacturing cost base. And we're already doing that. Who would have imagined? 11 years ago, we set up aerospace manufacturing in Belgaum. Okay? Those who have seen it are blown away. This was a tier 3 town then. Probably still is. We are making wheels for Airbus. It's not screwdriver technology. It's being forged, machined, and finished. And there's a process for that, right? It's from basic raw material to finishing. The entire value chain is residing in Belgaum. So similarly, we want to do this for toys. The toy market is about $100 billion, okay? India, I think our exports something like 100, not even 100 million, yeah, close to $100 million. Whereas tiny Vietnam is 5 times that, okay? China has, of course, got the lion's share. They've got scale. So how do we replicate those successes in India? This is a humble way of putting in these clusters.
Yeah. So, and you are going to provide all the services that any manufacturer wants. Is that the idea?
Okay. We go in one step further. Okay. We tell Aequs Infra build the campus. Okay. We build the campus and we let it out to manufacturers who are interested. So it's almost a plug and play. We provide buildings to suit their requirements, uninterrupted power and water, and all other services, transport, area, contract labor management, compliance management. Let's talk of ease of doing business later. We've got a lot of things to say in that space. Generally, people struggle with setting up manufacturing in India. You have to first get the land, then you have to get the approvals, then you have to get the building permits, then you have to get environment control, clearance, you have to get pollution control. All this happens sequentially. Takes a long time. So in an organized big company, they have the machinery to do that. But when you go to the next level, it's a nightmare. Okay. Now think about a new foreign entity coming and setting up shop in India. It will take them minimum 2 years to set up things and get going. We promise them we'll get your production going in 8 months flat. That's our promise. So in other words, we have said, Aequs calls itself ecosystems of efficiency. We want to set up an ecosystem which will provide maximum efficiency and ease of doing business for people who come and manufacture in our cluster.
Okay, and I believe you also want to give design and technology services, but I'll come to that later and ask Ravi that question. But before that, Gunjan, I mean, what Kishore said is exactly, I mean, the literature is full, I mean, very clear that exports is the path to growth. I mean, it has been for China, it has been for Southeast Asia. India has been lagging on that count, and industrial clusters, you have been following a industrial cluster policy for a while. What is your sense, Gunjan? How is that working? What are the newer initiatives that you are taking?
Thanks a lot. I agree with Kishore. The way forward is essentially that how we can create more clusters. And the cluster need not be just, that you provide the land and that's it, and you create a cluster and name it, particular sectoral cluster. We need to go beyond that. And going beyond that is that you provide all these services so that the companies can focus on their core activity instead of getting bothered about these ancillary issues that rise up. And also, if there is a plug and play facility, when all these approvals are in place, so for example, the environmental clearances, the building plan approvals, all of these, take a lot of bandwidth of a company. And if these are in place, then of course, this definitely helps a company to set up. Now, what is it that government has been thinking and what we have been doing in this regard? So we do have our government organization, KIDB, which does to some extent, but KIDB has its own, because how many can it, do? And because that has a bandwidth, it's a totally self-sufficient. It doesn't take any money from the government. So the land acquisition and development and then taking all these clearances is done by one organization. The IT revolution that you talked about essentially came because, all the big companies got into it. They created these office spaces. They created these, big infrastructure for all the companies from India and abroad to come and just plug and start playing. So similarly, of course, we need to do that. And which is why in our new industrial policy that came into existence in 2020, we have recognized that companies and the real estate companies and the other infrastructure companies that are providing these facilities will be given certain incentive, because hitherto we had not been recognizing real estate company when they're setting up any park. We were not giving them any stamp duty exemptions. We were not giving them, say, for example, any capital subsidy. So what we have done this time in our industrial policy, we have created a roadmap for setting up these integrated townships. We have provided them stamp duty exemptions. We have provided certain subsidy. We have ensured, ETP, STP. So all of that framework in a way has been created in our industrial policy. Apart from that, we have been talking to the number of organizations like Aequs, and we've been talking that why don't you come? Because more will come, the more industrial estates will come, and the way they can be run professionally. What happens is KIDB is been doing, it's providing till the time, a company takes the land and that's it, from there on. But the real story starts also afterwards, the managing the infrastructure and all. So we've been talking to, along with Aequs number of, and now, things are heating up. So we have a CDC, which is a Taiwanese park, which is coming up near the airport. We have created a Japanese industrial township.
Which one is that, Gunjan? The Taiwanese one?
Is a Century Development Corporation. It's a Taiwanese company which is setting it up. And in fact, the first company, TICO, has already taken space there.
A particular industry?
It is not particular. It's basically for the Taiwan companies.
Okay.
Taiwan, Japanese, those companies. Apart from that, I truly agree the cluster approach is the way to go forward. And we have been working on that. Like, Aequs is coming out with the toy cluster along with the consumer electronic durable cluster in Hubli Dharwad toys in Koppal with the help of the government. We are also, Mr. Ullas Kamath is here, and we are looking at, how we can set up an FMCG cluster again in Hubli Dharwad. We have a very dedicated machine tool cluster that we have set up in Tumkuru, which is with the help of the Department of Heavy Industries. So, and there what we do is, again, that we want to create testing centers there. We want to create R&D centers there. We are proposing an electric vehicle clusters. So the testing, design, technology have to be a kind of common services that have to be provided. And also they have to be run on the business principles. So we, in these aspect, we would look at, public-private partnership or a total business model. We can, private companies can come, like for EV, a private company has come and set up a testing center. So like these, there are various models that can be worked out. And we would be working very closely with the industry, because we really feel that the way Karnataka the path for its growth is through this mechanism. And we have IT as a solution. We have seen if Kionics alone was doing it, then we would have only got Electronic City, nothing else. So all that is possible because of, and there we were again pioneered with the centers. This ITPL was all created. So again, government has already done that. And now in a new way, industrial policy is showing us the way.
This cluster approach, you are saying no other state has done as much as we have. Karnataka has.
I would not like to. I would like to talk about Karnataka, not other states. We all say we are the best, but I think it is for the industry to decide and people to decide.
Okay. We'll come back on some more of that, Gunjan, a little later. Sanjiv,
if I can just
go ahead, Kishore.
Yeah. So when this US-China thing happened and they want to do this China +1 to de-risk sourcing from China, India's labor cost is 1/3 of China, half of Vietnam. Okay. And guess where many of the companies who moved from China went to? They went to Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. India got a very little part of it. So what are we missing? There's something we are missing here. That's my question.
And you think it's this plug and play, the difficulty of setting things up?
No, I think there's a lot of other things. There's softer things like trust and consistency of policy, taxation. So those are things which government will deal with, and they're dealing with it. But I think it requires a lot of marketing, and we have to really exhibit that India is really ready to do business, and we are going with the missionary zeal to grow our exports to, let's say, 50% of GDP. Why not? We are at 18%.
Okay.
In the next 10 years, then we are globally competitive.
Let me ask Sanjiv that question. I mean, his company is a global company. Most of the toys in the world currently, I guess, is produced in China. Sanjiv, how is India compared to the others? And this cluster approach, you think that's going to help India?
Yes, Sujit. I mean, like Kishore explained, there are certain strong advantages which India has, particularly with respect to the toys industry, where the cost of labor can be quite an important component. And side by side, India also has a pretty large pool of technical manpower and technical capability. So these two things can go hand in hand, and India's got a pretty, I would say, high potential, strong potential for growing as one of the global manufacturing hubs for the global market. When we look at the evolution of the toys industry, there are also certain other parameters and factors which come into play, which are about having kind of a total ecosystem and a supply chain for services and goods, which can facilitate how the industry can meet the global market requirements. Right? And that is an area where, considering the very complex set of requirements which the toys industry has, very high safety standards, and also a very large level of variation in the product range, very wide types of technologies which are adopted. This is the process which actually would take some time to develop in the Indian manufacturing environment. And in that journey, to have this kind of cluster approach or an ecosystem where you could possibly have design and engineering services, manufacturers of goods and components which go into the toy manufacture, which can allow the whole sort of ecosystem to work together in a responsive manner and also in a cost-efficient manner. I think that could be a reasonably good set of facilities to have. So I think that is an approach which is fairly, I would say, interesting and could possibly help us to overcome some of the challenges that we see in the manufacturing environment in India.
Okay, okay. Toys is a fascinating subject of always, but I mean, what are the things that I mean, India currently, what all is it able to do? What more can we do?
Yeah, India currently, I think, has a reasonably good manufacturing capability, right?
So that is what, creating molds and then.
Yeah, I mean, it could be about plastic products, for example, right? Being able to make plastic molded products. But then when you look at making the toys, the whole sort of industry, it's not just about the toy manufacture. There's a large number of inputs which has to go into the product, which have to comply with very high safety standards, for example, right? Because these toys are being used by children. So there's a fairly extensive element of involvement which the toy manufacturer has to have with the supply chain in developing the capability in the supply chain. So that is a pretty important.
So the supply chain includes what all?
Well, it could be even some very specific requirements, like, for example, the paints and the inks which go into the toys, the pigments which are used in the plastic toys or other products. Now, since these products are handled by children of a very young age, so these are extremely sensitive. So that's really a level of capability which we have to, and we are working on developing that in the set of suppliers that we have in India, right? But that is just one example over there. Like that, we have a number of other such capabilities which are under development in the Indian industry. And the other aspect, like you mentioned about tooling, the design, the engineering, the development capabilities also, because of the fact that we have a very high level of turnover in terms of the new designs which keep coming into the toys market. And that is really a unique feature of the toys industry, which is probably a bit different from other consumer goods industries. So because there's a very large element of novelty and evolution of products which takes place every few months. So there's a pretty short sort of a life cycle for individual products which has to be catered to. So the ability to be able to create those new designs, develop prototypes, and then convert them into actual finished goods and supply them to the market in time for the different seasons in the global market, that also is a pretty important kind of a capability which is required. And that again, if you have these services available with good collaboration with a lot of these service providers and the supply chain partners, that's something which is actually going to be a critical enabler for our growth in the future. So Hasbro has been on this journey with the Aequs. Aequs has been one of our early manufacturing partners. And we've been working together in Belgaum, both with Aequs and also another joint venture which Aequs has in Belgaum with a Chinese Vietnam company. So that has been a fairly good model, and working closely with partners like Aequs, we have in fact now come to a stage where we probably contribute more than 40 to 50% of the total toys which are exported out of the country. And also simultaneously, this has helped us to develop a good base for being able to cater to the Indian market requirements. Right? So a majority of the toys which we sell in India now are not imported by us. They are actually made by our manufacturing partners and development partners in India, and then supplied to the Indian market. So it is helping us also to sort of set up a supply chain for supplying quality products of a sort of a global standard of quality into the Indian market. So that's really the journey that we're on, and that's where we are looking, with interest at clusters of this nature also.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting.
Mr.
Shilpa?
Kamath, coming to you, you've been instrumental in setting up FMCG units across the country. Strictly speaking, they're not necessarily clusters, either the way we've known them or what Aequs is propagating. What value do you then see in this approach? Is it not enough for a manufacturer to pursue an exclusive, fully owned and vertically integrated manufacturing enterprise to achieve economies of scale and other advantages?
Thank you very much. You see, if you go back to 1991, that was the change in manufacturing in entirety happened in India when the Dr. Manmohan Singh's finance bill came to the picture. That was the first time all of us, we saw manufacturing getting incentives by moving their production to smaller states or smaller backward districts. It was earlier called as a backward district. So it started with Pondicherry, then it went to Silvassa, then Daman, then went to Himachal, then Uttaranchal, and then we saw some incentives in West Bengal, and then Jammu, and then Guwahati. And if you see, it was more of a political decision taken by the union government to incentivize. And when I say incentivize, it's huge. It is a 100% income tax benefit for the first 5 years and 30% thereafter. That means 10 years you have income tax benefit. Then you have those days excise benefit for the first 10 years, some places 5 years. And those days, some of the states gave almost 100% sales tax exemption for 5 years, sometimes up to 200% of the capital investment. And very few knew what this incentive meant. And that's how we could put up 27 units in 17 locations. And if you see the corporate tax today for the top 500 companies, most of them pay less than 20%. Most of them, and most of them pay only MAT. So even though the corporate taxes are 30 plus, but everybody are less than 20. Why so? Because everybody's manufacturing today in the country has direct, indirect, state and federal incentives. Okay, that's from 1991. We are talking about 31, 32 years of history. And just to give an example, what it makes the difference for a manufacturer, like in Guwahati, we have 5 factories. Each truck, if you have an incentive of about 2 lakhs rupees, they can move around the truck 2 times around the country, right? That's the kind of transportation benefit you used to get it, rather the income tax, both the state and the central, if you take together, that's the benefit what you have. But now, that all coming under sunset clause. Most of the benefits go away from 2027, according to me, like that go away. And then people had to see what is best way to manufacture. That's number one. Second question is, manufacturing always has to be closer to the consumer. But this fiscal benefits in 1991 moved to the states where it is beneficial to produce and send it to the consumer. That time, the diesel price was less than 5 rupees a liter. Today, we are talking about 100 rupees a liter. That time, dollar price was about 6 rupees. Today, it is about 75. If it is 75, it's good for an exporter. So today's context is, it is better to be closer to the consumer. And when compared to Thailand, I would, I'll agree with Kishore to a certain extent, but India is a huge domestic market. Export comes after you satisfy the domestic market. And the domestic market is good enough for us to set up hundreds of clusters in this country. And to that extent, the cluster will happen. And I'm a great admirer of Gunjan Krishna madam, because she came to our office a couple of years back, and she just asked me that what it takes to manufacture consumer goods in Karnataka. And that opened up FMCG cluster as far as Karnataka is concerned. I gave her the same story. I told her, this is how it is not happening in Karnataka. Karnataka is just an example of consumer goods. Is 25,000 crore market, Karnataka alone. And we produce hardly 2,000 crore. Rest of things are coming from other states as far up as Northeast and North and from the West. So a person using, like a shampoo in Bangalore city, how will you judge when it is manufactured in Guwahati and using the shampoo in Bangalore? And it's clear that it has to be produced in Karnataka and used in Karnataka. That's how the cluster comes in. Now, cluster is a way forward, no doubts. Karnataka is the most progressive state in that. And private cluster and the government cluster, there's a difference of trust. Generally, the small and medium enterprises, they always have what if. That what if only government can solve it. Again, I'm a big fan of government agencies because what they write, they follow it. They will take a little more time to write, but when they write it, rest of your life you can be sure about it. But that may not happen in a private organization. In a private organization, the recourse is the court. And the court, we are all scared. Small and medium enterprises don't generally go with the court route. For them, they're scary. That takes 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So second part of the question is that everybody will come to the cluster. And my recommendation, my suggestion is that it should be an integral part of the government policies, which is happening now. And the government should stay there. I'm there. This cluster, I'm there with this. Don't worry about it. And if there is it's a private public partnership with the government being there, it will be a fantastic success. No doubts in my mind. And the overheads today for most of the small and medium enterprises are about 10%. We should be less than 2%. And logistics cost for most of us is between 8 to 10%. We should be less than 6% today. And India works on single shift basis. Globally, it is a 3-shift basis. The moment people go to the 3-shift basis, unit economics will fall in place. You get the scale advantage. And imagine a situation, 2-shift, use it for domestic consumption. 1 shift on variable cost, you make it an export. Everything will be sold. The way you calculate will become different. And especially when the dollar is 75, it's more than welcome to export now so that your money will get more. So the day when we realize the unit economics, scale advantage, government as a partner, and ecosystem is taken care of. It is always there. I don't say that ecosystem is not there, but it is expensive. But under Atmanirbhar, Make in India, and the way how the government of Karnataka has taken the initiative in ESDM cluster, or it is olden days electronic city, or apparel park, or now toy cluster, and going forward with FMCG, other states will follow. End of the day, every state will have every product as a cluster. And that's where we can be very, very competitive locally and very, very competitive globally also. But that's the way forward, no doubts at all in my mind.
So you're visualizing a lot of clusters emerging across the country, is it? That's what will eventually happen.
Absolutely, because you see, especially in consumer goods where I'm coming from, each one of us, we have warehouses, like thousands and thousands of square feet in every our factory when it's not required at all. Because when we build 20, 30,000 extra square feet for simple reason to stock our raw material, stock our finished goods. If we are in a cluster, there will be a warehouse next to you. And we don't have to wait for the trucks. The logistics park will be next to you. We don't have to worry for the power. It will be uninterrupted power, quality power we get. And we don't have to have canteen for every factory. You can have a general factory for 25 factories, 50 factories. You can have buses plying them. You can have schools for them. Like Aequs has put up a school for their employees. Amazing thing you can do. All it requires is that you need to be together. And for that, you need to have a trust. And intellectual property, people think that they should not know what I'm doing, why they should know. And the compliance is also a little bit of irritation was in the past, but not any longer because of the GST. The game changer in the recent past was digitization of money and GST. So no, anything we do in the country, it is digitized. And under GST regime, it is better to manufacture where you are selling. And you can manufacture wherever you want, GST compliant. There's absolutely nothing the government should worry about. So to that extent, my take is that cluster will succeed. Trust has to come in. For that 1 or 2 clusters, if it comes, then it's a matter of time. People will get in. And 2 shift for domestic market, 1 shift for export market, we are good to go.
Okay. Major change in model emerging. Okay. Let me bring Ravi here. Ravi, you are also planning to offer even design and technology services to the companies that are going to be in these clusters. You are confident you'll get customers for those kind of services as well?
Yeah, thank you, Sujit. I'll bring a technology analogy. We have the hardware, the infrastructure, and our infrastructure is world-class. We need to have the software now. The software is the technology, the subject matter experts, vertical integration of the value chain, and the overall ecosystem. So one of the advantages, what China has over us, and Sanjiv can vouch for this one, is that China offers design alternatives to Hasbro and other toy manufacturers. And Hasbro has to pick and choose which looks good, which we are lacking currently. So in the Hubli cluster, we are setting up the Global Capability Center for idea to product journey. So, and we will have innovation labs. We'll have kids come in, play with concept toys. We'll have housewives come in, play with concept appliances, cookware, and pick up the best concept and bring it to realization. This will change the game, and this will be a real ecosystem for products to be sold in not only the Indian market, worldwide. I also want to highlight that though we are very good in software and engineering services and so on, but we have not developed world-class products from India. Either be it in consumer durables, you don't see sold in European and US markets, right? Because those are the most profitable markets in the world. So we want our ecosystem to develop world-class products which can be sold in European and US markets. This will give us a huge competitive advantage. And I believe after working for MNCs like John Deere, I believe the cluster approach is the way to go. In fact, when we set up our technology center, John Deere set up a technology center in Pune, it took a lot of time. But here there will be a technology center which you can take your idea to and you will see a product. The other thing what Sanjiv was mentioning is very important. Certification, safety certification. Right now, in North Karnataka at least, there is no agency which can certify that the ink or the paint or the polymer doesn't have any heavy metals or hazardous materials. I have to go to Bengaluru or Delhi to get it tested. So we are planning a certification and a testing center in Hubli so that not only companies like Pro and Aequs, but also the MSMEs can utilize this expertise and facilities to get their products tested. Certification is another important thing. Suppose if you want to get a certification for Europe, it is quite a humongous task to get it done. Now, the other thing we are lacking as an ecosystem, as a country as a whole, is subject matter experts. We don't have styling subject matter experts. They are all in pockets. Maybe a firm in Mumbai might be doing very good styling for toys. Maybe a firm in Bangalore is very good in electronics design. So that has to be part of the cluster. That subject matter expert, either he's doing consulting work or he's stationed at the cluster, the person has, the subject matter expert has to be.
Did we lose Ravi?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ravi, you're okay. Ravi, you're saying we have talent for all this, for toys, for consumer electronics, or consumer durables. No. We have enough talent for all this?
No, for consumer electronics, again, there is a void. We are currently depending on China to have the consumer electronics. And now with the government taking steps to build the semiconductor industry and the electronic manufacturing infrastructure, we will soon have that capabilities also. But right now, for toys, we have to depend on China. Toys, electronics, I mean.
Okay, okay.
And
Sanjiv,
that's another.
If Sanjiv, if Aequs offers all these design and technology services and all that, you use them?
Yeah, I think these are very interesting kind of, you could say, concepts which Ravi is explaining, because like I mentioned, since the toy industry is mostly driven by continuous innovation, designs being evolved continuously, and those have to be converted into physical products at very short lead times and then to be made available. Having a facility of this nature would definitely be a very good support as part of the ecosystem. Yes.
Okay, okay. Gunjan, I want to ask you, I mean, the government, of course, in Karnataka, for instance, you had the hardware park and the aerospace park and all near Devanahalli for a while. I think the government was trying to manage those. Do you think it's a good idea to kind of do a partnership with I could be wrong, but those don't seem to have taken off to the extent that, let's say, or some of the PPP models have taken off, clusters have taken off. Do you think it makes sense to make those also some kind of PPP models?
Absolutely. We even in the policy and otherwise, what we are saying is you can create private industrial park, and we were talking to a number of other players because so that, see, one of the difficulty which the people face is acquisition. Land is very difficult to aggregate, and that is something government can do very well. Government may not be very good at the management, perhaps, post. So you can bring both these strengths together and a PPP can work out very well. Only thing is that we have to have the risk mitigation and the roles and responsibilities and everything worked out very well. But that's a model that we can all work at. And we had spoken to the number of players, and we are looking at that this model can be worked out. Say, for example, we are looking at a pharma park, which is coming up in Yadgir. This is an aspiring district, as we call it. And similarly, we are looking at EMC clusters. So we are, for those, very open, because the land part can be provided. The management and the other part can be done by the private person. So those are the things that we are totally open to.
And you are giving these permissions quickly.
So that, again, permissions is essentially, see, there are various models of working it out. Suppose if the land around, so they can take land from us and we can be the equity partner in that. So that is kind of an SPV model can be worked out. If you feel that you are not able to take land like Aequs, what they have done, though it will not be called as a PPP, but they just took the land from us directly for their Hubli Dharwad. So they had the clear title, the land was there, so that can be worked. That can be one methodology. Other methodology is, suppose if you're doing it around Bangalore, the land prices are so much, it doesn't really work out. So then we can become an equity partners there. We had conversations with quite a few developers in that area. Somewhere the other, maybe the land pricing and the other things. So we couldn't work it out at that point of time, but we are open to suggestions. Many times private people also want, they want the ownership. So they would not. So it all depends, where it works out well, we are. But we have done a number of other things with the government of India, in fact. So what I call Tumkuru Machine Tool Park, that is with the Department of Heavy Industries, Government of India. Now we are developing these corridors. There are 3 corridors which are coming up. One is Chennai Bengaluru Industrial Corridor. Another one is Bengaluru Bombay Industrial Corridor, where Hubli Dharwad is a node. Chennai Bengaluru Tumkuru is a node. And we are working out Hyderabad Bangalore corridor, in which Yadgir becomes a node. Now, in this, Government of India and Government of Karnataka are working together. We have an SPV where everything is done in a very systematic manner. There would be an independent planning agency. So that those efforts are also on.
Okay, okay. So Kamath, how's the FMCG one progressing? What stage have you reached, and how much cost can you reduce, you think, with this cluster approach?
FMCG, like it should come out anytime now, and I think I got the in budget speech, CM sir has made it clear that he is for FMCG. It has come in the budget speech. Should come anytime. But again, from my point of view, it will soon everybody will come there, and the benefit should be for manufacturing alone. The benefit should be about 2 to 3% of benefit they should accrue because of the transportation and other logistics cost. And manpower is available abundant in the northern Karnataka. And when we say cheap labor in India, efficiency is also a big concern for all of us, because efficiency, productivity in Indian context is not as comparable to the eastern part of the world. So to that extent, it's a matter of time. But I'm very, very certain that the cluster approach will be the focus. And added to that, now you have new age manufacturers, in other words, who are going digital only, who are do not believe in manufacturing. They do not have legacy issues like existing manufacturers. For them to move to a different model, when, how much, what risk, all these things will come in the picture. So there, my thinking is that about 10 to 15% of their production they will shift. In consumer goods, if you take the businesses about 5 lakh crore, probably 50,000 crore will move towards the clusters as quickly as possible in the next 3 to 5 years. As they feel comfortable, then they start moving, because India's FMCG is growing at about 12% every year, year on year. So to that extent, incremental sales, they will definitely push it with the new clusters. But the big thing which you are seeing now is the e-commerce players, private label, and also the digital only, and they're not in general trade at all. And for them, their focus is how fast they can go to the marketplace, how fast they can print the label on the bottle. So that's where the companies like Aequs will become a game changer, so that you can go and sit with them. They will show you hundreds of bottles, pick up whichever the bottle you like. They will show you the labels, whichever the way you want to put the label. And they will also give you the basic formulation, and you add and delete whatever you want, so that you go into Hubli, Dharwad, sit there for 1 week and come out with your sample product, do the sampling. But to do that, if you want to have land, building, machinery, permission, it takes ages. By then you'll have lost interest. So the big thing which will happen now is private label, e-commerce, digital only, young entrepreneurs, and they don't believe in borrowing the money. As Gunjan madam said, one of the key things for Indian entrepreneurs is land should be in their name, building should be there on their land, so that they can borrow money against that. But once the land is not in your name, you cannot borrow the money. The building, nobody will lend you the money if building is not on your land. And just to give an example, that yesterday in the minister, one of the functions of Global Investors Meet curtain raiser, minister just announced that 99 years lease, now we are recommending to become an absolute sale deed. So even 99 years lease, it is next 3 generations. People feel that still it is a lease, it's not your own. Once you say it is your own, then the entire thinking will change. So that is for legacy manufacturers, old manufacturers, land, building, machinery, term loan, working capital loan. But the new age are capital driven. They take the capital from investors, put the money in what we call the cash burn into the building the brand, and just be there online, digital only, it works. So good to go for companies like Aequs. They need to have the expertise which is available, and India can be a fantastic place for domestic as well as export market. And in the Atmanirbhar and the geopolitical uncertainties, what we are seeing, it's all the more, India would be encouraging more for made in India for the world, which will happen. And Karnataka will be the #1 there. It is like Gunjan madam's slogan, it is for the world. From Karnataka, for the world. And we are pioneers, and we are working as a PPP only with the government of Karnataka. And if such clusters comes, every state will follow that for sure. And a lot of job creation. End of the day, government intent is to create jobs, and nothing like creating the jobs by what happened in the manufacturing. It's a great amount of job which can create. And especially in FMCG, we are committing 75% of the workforce will be local, and 50% are women. And to that extent, it will be good for the society as well.
Oh, good to hear that. Good to hear that. Kishore, I just wanted to ask you on this point that Mr. Kamath also made. So, I mean, people wanting to own land and all that, how much of that, I mean, that is then used to raise capital? How much of the issue is that for you?
Well, it's an interesting question. So we've had this challenge. The old methodology of thinking is to own land and leverage it, okay? And part of that reason is, I think, because we saw a huge real estate boom. And I know personally many Sikh companies which have gone down the drain rose like a phoenix from the ashes by just encashing on the real estate. But I don't think that's number one. Number two, we are seeing many of the large companies. It depends on the company policy. Some companies have a policy where they will insist on owning the land and having their own building. But there are some companies now, interestingly enough, in manufacturing as well, but also in the warehousing and distribution space, which is logistics space, which is now really, really humming, as Ullas just mentioned. So distribution logistics becomes a huge factor as companies are growing. So that's interesting. So those companies are willing to lease and they're open to lease. So that's what's happening in this. So it is a challenge, but what we are seeing, interestingly enough, is in MSMEs, we are able to give, how we have defined our product offering is very flexible. You give different types of buildings depending on size of requirement and the size of type of facilities needed. And then we are able to price the rentals accordingly. So we are getting fair amount of inquiries actually from an MSME space. It could be as low as 10,000 square feet going to 20,000 square feet. So the big boys will have bigger requirements of 50,000, 100,000, which we are slowly seeing, but we are seeing more action in the warehousing and distribution space as of now.
Okay.
Just to touch on one point which Ullas mentioned on comparing Thailand. I compare Thailand for the simple reason, such a tiny country is able to leverage so much export. And for me, exports means you're globally competitive. Closely aligned to that, if you look at our consumer electronics import, or even the toys import, we import something like 60%. You'll be surprised to know ovens, toasters, grills, rice cookers, we're importing 60% from China. Why are we not making it here? The simple reason is we don't have A, scale, right? And B, we are not cost competitive. So if we are able to export, then we will be globally competitive and we'll be able to also serve the local market.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And one thing to add there is that the prestige cooker, what I got in my marriage from my mother, it is 28-year-old. I only changed the gasket. And that's the quality of the cooker which we have. And that is, I'm talking about the cookers. So when I speak to prestige people, what is the thing they regret is that that's the quality what we gave and we continue to give. And the one family for a lifetime is one cooker. Very rarely people have changed because it works. So the same way the gas stove, it's 15 years, nobody has changed. So there are so many things which is there in our families, which we continue to use. So whereas if you ask anybody of a Chinese product, and they will say that they change every 4 years, because that's the way how India has built. India has built kitchen once, and maybe when they change the house, they change the kitchen appliances. It is because it works. Simply, it works. And if you take a housewife inside, she will tell you it works. I don't want to change it. So thanks to Prestige, the world-class product they gave, and which you're still using for decades and decades. And I completely agree with you that export is the way forward for India. And that is something which I am also looking forward. And we will do that.
If we have to be a global power, I mean, we remember those dark ages, right? When we were a closed economy and we are getting really terrible, shoddy product. How has that changed since liberalization?
Yes, sir.
So the products have become much better and more cost competitive. Another important thing, Sujit, is in India, you have the organized sector. Now, Ullas just talked about cookware. The organized sector is about 40%, 50%. And there are some 3 top companies dominating it. 50 to 60% is fragmented for small towns, which are cottage industries, okay? So there's an opportunity there for them to grow to the next level. And the cluster can provide that opportunity, right? They do not have capital to grow, number one. They do not have market reach either. So these are things where we can help them to grow, for those who are interested, so it's a win-win for everybody.
Okay. Shilpa?
Mr. Guttal, coming to you, apart from a model for regional economic development and strengthening competitiveness, one of the other goals of the cluster is also to accelerate innovation and entrepreneurship. How do you see your own cluster addressing this facet?
Thank you, Shilpa. Going ahead, Industry 4.0 would be a standard for most of the products being manufactured or the manufacturing units to be set up in India. And this would be probably almost unaffordable for small companies, the entrepreneurs, to have an Industry 4.0 compliant manufacturing unit. Going ahead, we plan to develop our ecosystem and our infrastructure so that we can provide an Industry 4.0 manufacturing unit for our entrepreneur. And in our toy cluster, we also have a small incubation center where the entrepreneurs can come, experiment with their products, and then graduate to the manufacturing units. So that's how we want to support the entrepreneurs and MSMEs in India.
So factories will come with all the sensors and all of that, is it?
Yeah, eventually when it becomes a mandate for us, for the manufacturers to be compliant, especially when they are exporting, they might want to have traceability, they might want to have the safety standards, everything to be tracked. It has to be Industry 4.0 compliant. And our center in Hubli will have a lab which does the Industry 4.0 scale model, and then eventually transfer it to all the manufacturing units who require the Industry 4.0 infrastructure and the expertise.
Okay. So we are almost out of time. So let's final words from each of you. Sanjiv, what is your message finally to other brands? The advantage of a cluster approach, is that the future?
Well, yeah, I think it could be a very important facilitator in India being able to leverage the potential that it has for the toys industry. And looking at some of the challenges that we have faced, I think it could take us forward a good distance with this kind of approach.
Okay. Mr. Kamath?
Cluster is definitely the way forward, and I would always love to have the government as a partner to start with. And as Madam rightly said, that at some point in time, it can be moved to an SPV, because to get the trust in SMEs, Government of Karnataka is a very important role it plays. And secondly, it is transportation driven, and if you can get the railhead to the clusters, if we are on the highway, and if it is nearer to the port, it always makes a difference for export. So my wish would be to work with the Government of Karnataka and create many clusters, maybe one cluster every district if it is required, do it, and shift the existing unproductive manufacturing facilities to the cluster. And they will see the benefit of at least moving from an existing manufacturing to a cluster, clear difference of 10 to 12% they will see year on year. That will be a huge margin. Right now, the manufacturing margin in consumer goods is about 15% net margin. And if they're able to get about anywhere between 5 to 10%, they will see the result themselves. And that's where seeing is believing, and people start moving it. And this is the time for us to support the SMEs to a great extent, to take them to most efficient cluster manufacturing driven places.
So SPV, you said SPV, it should be managed by an SPV is what you're saying, is it?
Yeah, because you see, the government become an arbitrator at some point in time, because as I said at the beginning, that the trust factor has to be built over a period of time. It takes time. And if the government is there, people are very, very comfortable. So to that extent, if government says that this is our cluster, and this is so-and-so is managing, and we are there, and create a separate SPV and become a part of that, over a period of time, people get the first-hand experience, and then they'll start believing whatever we are doing. And we need to move manufacturing and the marketing too differently, so that the manufacturing should be taken by the cluster, owners like Aequs, and they should focus only on other management of the brand, or the marketing, or the finance and things like that. And encourage the new age entrepreneurs to get into this cluster very quickly, so that the business will start.
Okay. Gunjan, I think everybody's, government has a huge role to play, and you said you're already playing that role to a great extent. What more do you think you might be doing?
So what we can do is work closely with the industry, both from the developer side, like what is it that they're really, what are the problems, what are the bottlenecks when it comes to, making these clusters and these managed clusters and managed services model for it to happen. That is like working from them. And we had done some change for all the private industrial parks that they are going to come up. Instead of them going to various agencies for the building plan approval, we had actually in our policy ensured that those approvals can only be given by one agency, that is within the industrial department, KIDB. So a lot more reforms like this can be brought about so that we can help these clusters. Apart from that, for us, we are having a global investors meet from 2nd to 4th November 2022. And what we are looking at it is, that Karnataka and Bangalore, the entire ecosystem becomes an integral part of the global supply chain. And for that cluster, development plays a very important aspect. For us, it is like innovate in Karnataka, build for the world is something that we are looking at. Thank you.
Innovating in Karnataka and build for the world. Final word, Kishore. So new models emerging now that can transform India.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is amazing. So as I mentioned, exports and local demand, local substitution for imported products. It's a tremendous market out there. But the thing is, it's fragmented. To give you an example, we talked to one toy manufacturer in the US, and they're trying to source, they're into the wooden toy, kids kindergarten sort of thing, wooden toys. They scoured the entire country. They said, actually, it's much cheaper for us to source from India. I've been looking for somebody to source from India. I have not found a company large enough to do it. Okay. You know how much they're sourcing from China at $600 million only. Okay. That's one company sourcing from China. And here he's not been able to find a company. So it just shows what the opportunity is, right? So I think clusters are a good way to do it. And I think we need to show some good examples of some wins. And if we can make that happen, I think we'll catch first India's attention and then the world's attention in that order. But there's one more thing which we need to address, which is the elephant in the room, which is the ease of doing business. Okay. At Aequs, we don't go with a complaint to the government, do this for this, do this for that. We take ownership and manage it. Okay. And we get tremendous support from the government of Karnataka. There's no doubt about that. But then we have government from the center and the state compliances to deal with. The license Raj was fortunately done away with many decades ago, but the Inspector Raj is alive and well. And when I say that, it's at the state government is fine, but then you go to the district level, then you go to the local government level. There are multiple layers of compliance things which need to be done, whether it's labor, factory, etc. For example, in Aequs, SEZ in Belgaum, we file something like 235 returns a year, compliance related. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for government to enlarge their trust. When I say government, it's also how we can reduce this burden, compliances. It's not as if we don't comply with anything. Okay. We can't make the exception as a rule for many people, right? And finally, it is how to ease the bureaucracy in getting approvals. I had suggested long back, why don't we digitize this process? Actually, with the digital capital of the world, right? Why can't we have crucial approvals, very time-bound digital thing? I'll give you a beautiful example is our passport office, which was an absolute mess earlier. Now, you don't even have to bat an eyelid, you get an appointment, get it on your phone, blah, blah, blah. Why can't we do the same thing for land, factory approval, inspection, pollution control, and those crucial 4 or 5 of them? Time bound, then we are able to see where it is at, which stage it is at, and where is it being delayed, etc., etc. It can be done. So
it can be done. I went for my passport renewal just about 10 days ago. I couldn't believe it. My process got over at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Next morning at 11 o'clock, I get my passport.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. This is better than Amazon, I think. So I think that's this is what is capable. I mean, what we are capable of, and I think a lot more. I mean, many of these other services can also be similar.
I'm sure with a little thought and effort from the powers that be, we can simplify these things to a great extent and make India really a destination of choice and a place of ease of doing business is easy.
So very interesting model emerging, clusters. Earlier, people would set up factories in Uttarakhand and like Mr. Kamath said, all kinds of places. But this cluster approach where clusters are offering all services from design and technology to, as Kishore said, even government compliances, everything under one umbrella. All that the brands need to do is to focus on their branding and marketing. So this could be one of the big answers to India's, manufacturing prowess in the future. And everybody will be watching closely to see how these clusters progress. Thanks a lot for this very interesting discussion. Gunjan, Kishore, Mr. Kamath, Ravi, Sanjiv, delight to have you and hope to have you again sometime. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Thank you, Shilpa.
Thank you.
For hosting us and conducting a lovely session. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Shilpa.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.